Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome at Genesys Budapest office. This is a special event, kind of like re-warming again an old series about Kotlin and Android as well. Especially, we're going to talk about Kotlin Multiplatform and how can you use one language across many different regions, many different platforms as well. As you can see, the agenda behind me, there's going to be two roundtable discussions. The first about how can you use Kotlin Multiplatform, kind of like from conceptualizing to applying in production. At the end of this session, there will be a little Q&A session. So please check the QR code. You can submit your questions ahead and vote for that as well if you do not have any, but you see some interesting thingy. The second session is going to be about how to overcome the hurdles and the problems you could see around switching to Kotlin Multiplatform as well by the same folks talking. In between them, there's going to be a little break when you can have great dinner at the balcony, New York style hot dogs as well, especially. And at the end, there's going to be what's not there is actually a quiz game when you can win 2 full year subscriptions of IntelliJ IDEA, actually. Thanks to JetBrains, our supporters as well. So please stay with us. This is going to be fun. You can learn a little bit as well. So moving on to next one, our first discussion is going to be, the moderator is going to be Balázs Gerlei, the co-organizer of Android Budapest. And the second session is going to be moderated by Tamás, Fábián, organizer of the Kotlin Budapest team, because this event is actually kind of like merging together the two groups all together. So please, gents, please applause for our speakers.
Thank you. Hello, and a warm welcome from the Android Budapest side as well. So let's not waste our time. So we will have 2 sides, as our host just told us, and I would like to call our panel of experts. First off, Bence Boros. He just finished being head of Frontend development and product strategy at Do Group. Before that, he amassed a decade of experience of being a hands-on Android developer and an engineer pivoted to Kotlin Multiplatform. Thanks. He led a 10-person cross-functional team, and they shipped around 30 products and achieved about 65 to 70% of code sharing between Android, iOS, and the web. So warm welcome to Bence. Maybe a hello? Okay, maybe a better mic now. Next up, Csaba. Szugyiczki, or Szugyi, he's from he's our returning panelist from Supercharge. He's a lead mobile engineer there, and he is also doing native Android development for more than 10 years. He also tried different cross-platform tools, all from PhoneGap and Cordova, all the way to KMP and Flutter. And nowadays, he's figuring out a way to optimally deliver products with each tools and what is possible to achieve with them. So warm welcome again to Szugyi. Next up, my friend and fellow co-organizer of Android Budapest, Márton Braun. He also works for JetBrains, so he will talk about surely how they think about KMP and CMP. He basically, as I'm sure know, JetBrains is the steward of both Kotlin Multiplatform and Compose Multiplatform, and his job is to engage with the community and basically make Kotlin mobile development more awesome and Kotlin Multiplatform more awesome. So he has not doing hands-on Android development for a while. Though that being said, he just rewrote the Kotlin Conf app in using both KMP and CMP. So give it up to Márton. Last but definitely not least, Mirzamehdi Karimov, or Mirza. He's basically an Android developer for 7 years, and he currently works as a senior Android developer at Root4Me. You may know him from developing 2 awesome KMP libraries called KMP Notifier and KMP Out. He also started on the side, just as a side, publishing his own apps, just 7 of them, not a big deal. So using KMP and CMP for Android and iOS. So again, give it up for Mirza. Okay, just as a warm up, let's talk about basically how production ready or how stable is KMP and CMP. I think if you think about it, KMP, Kotlin Multiplatform, is pretty production ready. It's said that it's stable. So, but with CMP, it's not that clear, or at least not for every platform. So actually, I would like to start with Marty, his thoughts about this. If I think correctly, I have to say that I haven't used CMP for sure. KMP little, but CMP, on the JetBrains site, you are telling that for iOS it's still in beta, or web, I think it's alpha, right? And all for Android, it's stable. So what's the state?
Yes, so all of that's correct. KMP itself is stable. It's production ready. It's been for like a year and a half across all platforms except WASM, which is still like I think in alpha officially. And then on CMP, on Android, it's of course stable because it's just Jetpack Compose. It really literally is just Jetpack Compose. On desktop, it's also been stable for quite some time, like several years. We use it for Toolbox, for example. Hopefully everyone uses JetBrains Toolbox to open your IDEs. So that's actually a Compose application if you didn't know. And for iOS, we are in beta, which means that, I mean, it's already pretty close to being there for like everyone's production use, and a lot of people are already using it in production. But we do have some final things that we want to wrap before we like actually call it stable. But as always, these are labels, and you can try and see if it already works for your use case, because chances are it probably does.
Yeah, I have some React Native experience. I have to come out with that. But, with that, the question quite frequently comes up, what is stable? Well, it's just a version number, right? So what if it begins with 0? At least Kotlin Multiplatform is not.
Yeah, like ultimately us calling it stable shouldn't be what convinces you. It should be you trying it and seeing that it works.
Yeah, so actually see how it's working for you. I will turn to Csaba, Szugyi. What's your experience? Did you use both of them?
Yeah, we just started using Compose Multiplatform. So currently we are writing 2 apps using it. They are not yet in production, but so far we haven't seen any issues. So we are convinced that it's pretty production ready. We are already testing it. It's through the UAT phase. So on our side, it's working correctly.
Yeah, definitely bug reports going to Marty. So, okay. Let's see, Mirza, what's your experience with it? You develop multiple applications on your own, and you're also working, I assume, in your work with KMP and CMP as well, right?
Yes, I already built and published like the 7 of them using Kotlin and Compose Multiplatform. And I don't have any experience with iOS. I mean, like with the Swift, but I had to kind of learn it. And my thinks that what like the production ready means, if you publish in, for example, App Store, and all the apps that I published has some in-app subscription. And if you get money and the people give some review, then I don't think like it's alpha or beta. For me, it's like, okay, people like it, people give like the stars, and people pay for that. So I can say, okay, it's production ready.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, Bence, in the intro, basically, it was mentioned that you reached a pretty high code sharing between the platforms. I'm especially curious on the iOS and the web part, because at least to me, it's obvious that it's easier from the Android side to approach things. But how hard was it to reach this high level of code sharing with them?
So, is it good if I hold it like this? Sorry, first time. So we decided to export everything, including the view models and every layer below it, and dumb down the UIs as much as possible. So we literally exported ready-baked UI states and UI models. So the only responsibility Jetpack Compose and Swift UI had, and even React, that prints some text or string that we ready-baked in the UI model. So probably that's it.
Okay, actually, let's continue with you, because you also led a team, right? Pretty large team of developers. So organizing a team using a cross-platform solution is, I think, far from trivial, especially when members coming from different backgrounds, like from native Android developer or another cross-platform solution maybe, or iOS developer. So how could you organize the team effectively?
So I was in a fortunate position because we built the team from the ground up, and we especially hired for people who were either experienced, I mean, who's experienced enough in Kotlin Multiplatform, given that it's so young. So we specifically hired an iOS developer who wanted to try KMP, and Android guys who also wanted to try this new experience, new platform.
Okay, so now Suji, please. You also work with a lot of people. You are working at an agency, Supercharge. So I assume that you have at least some form of challenge of deciding even what technology to use, but then basically getting the developers on board. So how is it going for you?
Yeah, so on our side, sometimes our customers are coming to us like, we want to do this project with KMP or with Flutter or with React Native, usually because they have someone within the company who already knows that technology. So when we cannot convince them to do full native development, of course, then we just try what suits the project best. And nowadays we are leaning towards KMP and Compose. So I will tell you what not works. So if you want to do this, like you want to do KMP and you think, okay, I have the Android guys, they know Kotlin really well. They will do everything KMP related, and the iOS guys will only like do the front end stuff like the side build, and they just have to consume everything. That will not work, because you will end up with really not motivated iOS team, and they will just lose every control over the whole application development. And it's not really a great experience for the whole team. So we moved toward our iOS developers like doing Kotlin work. And if you just show them step by step how it's done, like you start with like easier tasks, like just writing a few lines of Kotlin code in the view model, and then start integrating some easier APIs, then they will get it, and they will. Swift and Kotlin are not that different, and the Swift UI and Compose are not that different, so they will learn really quickly. And once they start doing it, they feel much more confident doing it than in the beginning.
Yeah, actually, I think that's the important point that you touched on. Basically, for both that you talked about, Bence, basically depends on where the developer's coming from, whether it's a new team or an existing team. But if you have an existing team, I would imagine that it's not easy to convince the iOS folks. And I really feel that to be really productive in a team, you cannot just say that, well, that's what it is, that's what we were going to use, but basically get them on board. So I would like to ask Marci, what do you think from JetBrains side? Are you doing anything special to get people on board?
We are, of course, and especially now that, like, obviously stabilizing iOS is like very close on our roadmap. We are looking more and more at building materials and things like that towards iOS developers, towards decision makers on top of the current materials that we already have. Like, we already have a bunch of things in this realm. But we, like, ideally, I think you, as Suji said, like, you should involve your iOS developers in this. You can only get so far with someone building it on their own, like from the Android side. And from what we heard from adoption stories from various companies, it's important that iOS developers don't see this as like, I'm going to lose my job tomorrow because no one will have to write Swift anymore.
Of course, AI will write the code. Right?
Yeah, everyone's going to lose their job anyway. So what's the, No. So basically, like, making sure that iOS developers are involved and they are willing to contribute and they want to learn how this all works is I think really important. And we, again, like, want to target more and more iOS developers as well. We've actually been to an iOS conference recently, and we got really good feedback there from a lot of iOS folks. Apparently they're, at least from what my colleagues gathered, apparently they're a lot more open and friendly towards KMP than any other cross-platform solution.
I thought for a moment you would
previously.
say that they are much more friendly than you would imagine from the Android side, but
No, they were perfectly friendly with the JetBrains booth and people selling KMP, and again, like they were quite open to it, and they specifically said that they resisted other cross-platform frameworks previously. So I think we're really trying to be the solution that embraces the native part of development as well and makes sure that you can still do things like properly.
yeah, we will definitely talk about other cross-platform solutions as well in the second section, so hang tight for that. But I would like to go back to you, Bence, for a moment, because you said that you specially hired people for this role. So how hard was it to specially hire for KMP, and how did you do that? How do you even say in the job description that you want to do that?
Depends. For Android folks, it's easy because they are just hyped. iOS is a completely different story. iOS developers are in denying probably that the industry is moving to cross-platform and actually multi-platform solutions. So it was quite hard. But if you convince someone that they can actually learn a new language, new tooling, they can build fancier UI because they're gonna have more time dedicated to it, then you'll probably find the right hires.
Okay, Mirza now. So what convinced you personally to start working with KMP?
First, to look cool, I can build an Android and iOS app together. But second one is like that's my personal opinion. I think that like the Apple users are more like to pay for the app in subscriptions. So I needed to learn somehow like the Swift to develop the mobile app. But as soon as I wanted to start, then the iOS for the CMP became alpha. I was like, okay, that's a great moment. I will just do with the Kotlin and Compose Multiplatform. So I just went with the flow and it just continued like that.
Yeah, that's actually another good point. Thanks for raising it. So if you are an indie developer, for example, nowadays, if you need to basically decide between the two platforms, it's not really a question, I would say. I mean, as you said, iOS, it's much easier to convince people to pay for applications. So you definitely need to target that. So kind of you have to, if you only have capacity for one application, you kind of have to choose between going iOS or going cross-platform. That's my opinion. But what are your opinions? Do you agree with that, or does anyone disagree?
Yeah, I can't know what our clients think about this. And for sure, everyone is looking for cross-platform solutions nowadays. So the demand is really high from the client side because they always hear about the nice success stories about these tools. But there is also a learning curve. So I guess, Mirza, you never dealt with XC frameworks and provisioning profiles and stuff like that. So it's not like, okay, I will just set up and go. You will have to learn a lot. And it's like exponentially true for the iOS folks. They will have to learn a new language, new tools, new IDE. So yeah, it can be done, but there are still some like learning curves in this.
Yeah, and that's also a good segue to our next question. But before that, I would like to mention that I clearly remember, even during my university years, if you install Java, it was saying that, well, it runs on fax machines and everything, and TV set-top boxes and everything. And the mere thought of just write once and run everywhere is age-old. I think it's as old as programming itself. But yet, I see that it never that easy. So the next question is about sharing code and what to share and how effectively can you share code between the platforms. Because as I mentioned, I have limited experience with KMP, but I did work on Flutter projects and React Native projects. And sometimes I have the feeling that you need native experience for both platforms on top of knowing the language and like JavaScript. Oh, don't get me started on that, but so you need to have experience on knowing the cross-platform solution technology and the language, and also both platforms. How true is that in your opinion, Szugyi?
It is true. So you will need some knowledge about iOS, like just I said, provisioning and how these frameworks work, how SPM works, why you shouldn't choose CocoaPods nowadays and stuff like that. So it's not just like you start and it will run everywhere. And also if you have to integrate something that has dedicated Android and iOS SDKs and not KMP ready SDK yet, then you will need to like somehow use those, and then you will end up writing maybe more code that is not shared. And it really depends on what you want to do. Most of the applications out there just really fancy JSON interpretations. If you just call an API,
I would like to argue with that. I sorry, don't get me wrong, but I really don't like that thought. I mean, it's true for many applications, but at the same time, in the last couple of like 5+ years, I worked on applications that are not like that. So there's definitely things like to communicate with specific hardware, for example. That's one that comes to my mind. And if you have specific security, considerations like a password manager, but you're right that many applications are like that. So sorry to interrupt you, but do you think that KMP and CMP and basically cross-platform solutions at large are specifically targeted to those applications that you are talking about?
Yes, I really think that these tools will shine in this realm of applications. And what you mentioned, it's a really good point. Thank you. I think KMP and like other cross-platform tools will not be that useful in that kind of applications, because you will end up just sharing a tiny part of your app, and you will just fight the system of how to do things, and you will not really save any efforts or time or money or resources.
Yeah, so I would say as a takeaway from that, for me at least, is that you should identify the parts of your application that are really dependent on the platforms. And I think these are going or getting less and less, I would say. But especially if you have an application that mostly deals to basically to present something coming from the server, these cross-platform solutions can help a lot. And really, you can achieve a lot of code sharing. But I actually want to turn to you, Bence. Oh, sorry, go ahead. If you have a thought.
One more thought. Recently, we had an application that had really depended on the platform SDKs. So what we ended up was creating a dedicated iOS SDK, a dedicated Android SDK that did the hard work of this background work, and created a lightweight Compose Multiplatform on top of those native SDKs. So you had the best of both worlds. Like our iOS developer could work on a native iOS SDK, and then we just created a thin layer of Compose on top of that.
Yeah, that's also a good point. And I also, with my limited experience, I've seen that working with native components, I think, is a strong suit of KMP, especially compared to things like Flutter, where it's much harder. So even I have one very recent experience of we are developing SDK, native SDKs, and also wrappers from different cross-platform solutions. But we didn't develop, so far at least, the wrapper for KMP because and we have customers using it because it's so easy to do as compared to Flutter, where you really needed a wrapper to use it. But again, going back to you, Bence. So basically, going back to the high code sharing you mentioned, how you build it out. So what do you start with? Obvious one is, of course, the business logic, but you, I guess, touch the UI layer as well. And how would you decide if you start a new application?
Yeah, so to add to Szugyi's first, KMP, when you're doing KMP work, you're basically developing a platform or framework. It's incredibly easy to over-architecture your layers. And that's exactly what we did. Even though we achieved the high...
We all do.
Yeah. Even though we achieved the high code sharing rate, it took us like 2.5 days to make a simple screen with a list and some integration. It was just wasted time. And as Szugyi said, we were just a reflection of the backend. So yeah, it's incredibly easy to do that. But I wanted to share everything, including the view models, to actually write the code once, test it once, and break it once. And it turned out to be just great. It was like magic. We just did the framework and the data just appeared on iOS and the web. It was wow.
Yeah, write it once, break it everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mirza, now to you for a little bit. So how would you structure your app nowadays? You wrote many applications, so I assume that performance or like productivity, more like productivity was quite important, so you can maintain all of them. So how KMP and CMP can help you in that?
With performance, I have to say you will have some performance issues mostly. At least in my apps I had, but it comes, I think, mostly from the Jetpack Compose part, not the Compose Multiplatform part. But I know that it's in progress. Just like whenever I increase the library Compose version, somehow I see, okay, app now performs like the better from the last time. So it's a good thing, but still we will have, I remember, for example, just last week I was working with a Google Map in the Compose, and we had some streak mode in the application. Basically, it was checking if something is on the background thread or not. So somehow like the Google Map didn't work. It was just like it was freezing. So then I just found some weird issues on the GitHub that if you just commented that streak mode, then it will work better. So that was like the weird issues that there's like that small things that causes some performance issues, but I think it gets better. But I will add something to that code sharing that you asked earlier. With Kotlin, of course, you can write desktop, web, and mobile app, but I think it doesn't mean that just because you have to write for all platforms. For example, I see the people, for example, write the mobile app, then they want to add desktop and the web support. But sometimes when you add some desktop and web support, you can lose some, let's say, for example, you have some push notification in the mobile app, but you usually don't use like the push notification in the web or the desktop. So when you add, for example, desktop and the web targets, you are basically you need to somehow wrap it in the common, and it will just do nothing, which will be just meaningless. Also, for example, you can share, for example, the code in 4 platforms. For example, in my case, I don't remember any apps that I use both in desktop, web, and the mobile apps. It's only, for example, Slack. That's for example, web, desktop, and the mobile app. So I think you can share the code, but you need to specify, okay, I write for the desktop, or I write for web, or I write for mobile app.
Yeah, but you can do it, right? So Marty, I think you just recently, as I mentioned previously, that you rewrote a conference application, which I would say also I think is a pretty good use case for using a cross-platform solution. Not only if you are doing it for the Kotlin conference, which lends itself, but still. So you wrote it for the web as well, if I know, right? So it's basically the same thing displayed on the web and the mobile, or how is it?
Yes, so with the Kotlin Conf app, of course, it's the practical production application for people attending the event. It's also obviously a sample for us for KMP and CMP. So for both purposes, we are targeting all the platforms. Desktop is probably the only one that is not going to be used by anyone live, but it's a really good development platform because we get to use Compose Hot Reload now, which I don't want to get lost in, but if you haven't tried Hot Reload yet for Compose, you really should.
And Marty has a great talk about it. So
thank you. Yeah, we'll also obviously cover it at Kotlin Conf. So if you wait like 3 weeks, there's going to be really good official content about it as well. So the Kotlin Conf app and all of its platforms is actually a good example of an app which looks the same and mostly behaves the same on all platforms. But for example, we do have features like push notifications, which we do use KMP notifier from Mirza. And we have that basically just for the mobile source sets. And then we have a separate implementation for web, where we also have scheduled notification support. And then on the desktop part, we just have an empty implementation. But with KMP, we do have the flexibility of just hiding some UI features on different platforms. Like we have like a very simple, very basic feature flag system. And every platform just passes in what it supports or what it wants to customize based on the feature flags. So desktop, for example, just skips the notification setup in onboarding because that will never happen there, or it hides it on the settings screen. Or on iOS, we choose like different animations between screens because it's more natural to not have a fade between screens. Or navigation on iOS like goes back with swipe navigation, where on Android it would be the regular like predictive back shrinking animation.
I have to say that those are the things which I don't like about cross-platform solutions. So you have to recreate basically the standard functionality of the UI frameworks of each platforms.
Well, it depends. So with the navigation library, the Compose navigation library, it does the platform specific behavior by default, for example. So it has swiped back configured only for iOS by default. But of course you can like mix and match any of them in any way you want, but it is going for the platform defaults.
But now that we are talking about this, so Marty, how do you keep up with the platform releases? Because you know there's a new iOS version coming out, new Android version coming out. You have to adapt the cross-platform solution to support the same things as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're building most of your code on the shared Kotlin side, then it's like usually just wrapped by libraries that you're building on top of. Like we have the huge ecosystem, which gives you, you know, like database handling and networking and all of that. So for those parts, you don't really have to do anything when versions are bumped. And then if you want to call like something brand new, like there's a new device discovery API on iOS, for example, then you do your like version bumps and like target SDK and whatever that's called on the iOS side, and you pretty much get access to all of those APIs immediately with KMP. Like the native interop exposes anything that has Objective-C headers shipped by Apple, and as soon as that SDK is out, you can already use it from Kotlin. Obviously, only for the iOS source set when you're like splitting by platform.
Yeah, and actually stay with this code triangle for a little bit because I think it's a key part of it. I mean, that's one of the main aims to use the cross-platform solutions. So any of you would like to take this, how do you decide what to share? So, or where do you start out with? Do you start with, again, the business logic and go from there? Or what would you start with? Again, any of you who have thoughts?
Well, just share as much as possible because that's the point. That's why we do it, I guess. So if you cannot share too much, maybe it makes sense for you that you have something like a business critical logic that you don't want to duplicate. Maybe share that if that's enough for you, or you just want to start using it, or you have like already it's a pain point for you. I remember we were working on a mobile banking app. And whenever we had to touch the initialization of the the initialization was like getting all the credit card data, the account data, the user data, and we had one project manager on the project who knew how it worked, like which step should follow which step. And whenever we had to touch it, we were like basically not pair but try programming, like the project manager in the middle, and then an iOS developer, and then an Android developer, and we were just like typing what he said.
Let's not imagine that.
And if we use Kotlin Multiplatform back then for this particular initialization, then it would be just the project manager and one mobile developer, for example.
Great. Okay, any other thoughts from anyone?
If I can add to just like the exact example, I remember like working on Android maybe like 5 years ago on an app, and already we were all on Swift and Kotlin, and we could already do things like, here's these 40 lines of logic in Kotlin with, you know, like collection operations and things like that. Send that over to the iOS side because we didn't have code sharing yet, but they could like very easily adapt that into Swift. Like that already worked great, even just because of the how close the languages are, given that they both evolved at the same time. But yeah, like now with actually shared code, like this really gets to the next level.
You really have to weigh in what are you going to share, because especially if you are developing to the web, you are going to lose Kotlin language features. Like there's no flow connectors on the web. We had to specifically build a listener interface with on each on error, on complete calls to listen to our flows. It was quite similar on iOS as well, because Marty, there's no native Swift and the Flow exporters.
Brought your notebook?
Just yet. So we had to rely on TouchLab solutions when they become available. But before that, like I said, we were falling back to these easier solutions. And another note, you're going to lose data objects, sealed classes, exhaustive event branches, a lot of features. So you really have to decide if you're going to share a piece of code or not, because that's going to have a huge impact on your Android code as well.
Yeah, I hope you. Okay, go ahead if you want.
Yeah. So to clarify, the part of multiple things. So obviously, you can use any Kotlin language feature in your shared code. What matters is the interface that you provide ultimately to the outside world. So you do have to be careful there, because there are like platform-specific considerations, and not everything bridges cleanly, because like not all languages have the same features. So we can only adapt so much. But like within your implementation details, you can use all of these things. What you have to be really careful about is the API. And then specifically for the iOS part, which we hear a lot of feedback about, what we're doing here is a project called Swift Export, which will basically generate an idiomatic layer of Swift code on top of your Kotlin API, so that Swift users don't have to go through the Objective-C headers that Kotlin native has historically generated, because that's been around since like 2018, and people were still doing iOS development with Objective-C, so we had to support it and so on.
I have to interject a little bit. I actually started learning iOS development, but when I saw Objective-C, that kept me away from it.
I have a current year talk which shows Objective-C code, and don't ask me why. Anyway.
To scare Android developers. You're preparing it for Halloween or something?
It's only for Kotlin Conf.
Costume idea, Objective-C.
So it's this Swift Export project that we're working on. We are getting ready to do the first public release, which is going to have a lot of basics supported, and eventually we do want to grow the scope of it so that it will support things like coroutines and flows from Swift into Kotlin. So we would generate a nice layer of Swift code on top of your Kotlin, which already knows how to call into the Kotlin layers underneath, and you get like a pure Swift API that you can interact with soon.
Go ahead, Szugyi.
Let me add something to this heated conversation. Exception handling between JVM and Objective-C or Swift. It's a nightmare, because on the JVM world, you just throw a runtime exception whenever you feel like, oh, it's an invalid argument, it's something bad happened, I don't want to deal with it, someone else will deal with it, and the iOS side will tell you, okay, I will crash. And there's no way to prevent it. There are ways, but you have to like say, okay, I will throw an exception. And what kind of exception? No, it will be an exception. I don't want to deal with it on my side. You will deal with it. So yeah, it's not that easy yet.
You are already answering my next question, basically. So I hope you prepared with some anecdotes, because I really want to hear about best and worst experiences, and kind of you already talking about one of them. So, but if you have another one, let's hear it. So like the worst and best.
Yeah, this was the worst. That dealing with like the iOS guys asking what kind of exceptions can we expect from this like huge integration of different networking libraries and database libraries, and we are like. A lot of them, like there's no internet connection, there's no, I don't know, something bad happened, but what? We don't know something, we will throw an exception, just catch it and deal with it. Okay, but how? Because they cannot catch these kind of exceptions, so yeah, maybe that's.
So what do you do on the Android side, which presumably uses the same code?
Just catch all the exceptions.
And you rethrow cancellation exceptions, right?
Of course.
Always do that, folks. Yeah.
Don't even get me started on cancellation exceptions.
Let's start.
There's an open discussion about like, what's the Kotlin name of like, instead of try catch, you can say run catching. And there's an open discussion about run catching should rethrow cancellation exceptions. And Kotlin folks say, no, it should not rethrow. But everyone else says it should rethrow because it's a special kind of exception. It shouldn't be there in the first place.
Okay, let's hear it from Marty, the arbiter.
No. I mean, I know the problem. We all know the problem. We tell people not to use run catching in that scenario because you're gonna like have problems with it. So obviously like that's what we also
Can you
teach.
detail the scenario a little bit for everyone? So
Sorry?
can you detail the scenario what you're talking about for everyone?
So run catching is a function that lets you run a bunch of code. It catches all exceptions and then it gives you a result back, like a Kotlin standard library result type, either a success or an error in this special like value class. And it also catches cancellation exceptions, which are not a regular exception. They're a signaling mechanism for coroutines when cancellation has to be propagated between different jobs. And so run catching, unfortunately, also catches this, which is quite hard to then rethrow because you already have a result object out of it. So it is just kind of messy. So you have to write your own run catching, which rethrows automatically or something like that. I don't know what the latest is on like the public issue. As far as I remember, just off the top of my head, I think we decided that it needs to go and we need a different function, but it's really hard to name the new one now, which is 90% of standard library design problems. I think that's where it is. We obviously know that it doesn't play nicely with coroutines.
Yeah, run faster than catching. Okay, Mirza, what's your best or worst experience? You can choose.
But the best experience I have like the iOS app finally, and the worst experience is because I usually hated to use the iPhone. Usually I use the Android phone, but I have friends who use the iPhone. Whenever we go to the coffee shop, I'm like, okay, give me your phone. I need to test this app, and they're like, okay. So this is like the worst experience, and soon I have to buy like the iPhone. That's the worst part.
That's the worst experience. Okay. Okay, Bence, what's your best experience with KMP and CMP?
The best is definitely that it works like magic. Data just appears and just works out of the box. Most of the time. There are exceptions.
All the time, every time.
Yeah. The worst, there are a lot.
Let's start.
So this can easily become a one-man show. Most Android developers are not into Kotlin. I mean, not deep into Kotlin multiplatform just yet. So there's gonna be a designated someone who's going to handle all the framework development, releases, everything. And if he gets hit by the train, then your project's dead. So yeah, probably that's the biggest issue. Second, testability. When you introduce JS to your targets, then most testing platforms fail. The only exception is CoTest. We had great results with it, and you can write beautiful tests with it. Highly recommend it. Yeah, probably.
Okay, let's actually turn to you, the audience. So if you have any questions, there's a Slido link there. Oh, sorry, Martin, you can.
Yeah, if I can just follow up on
Sure.
the like Android developers are not quite on KMP yet topic. I think you should be if you're an Android developer. Like you're in a really strong position to go to KMP. A lot of what you do with multi-platform looks the exact same as what you're writing for Android. Like now that we have the entire stack covered with Compose multi-platform, you're using the same Compose APIs. You're using the same view models if you want. You can use Room. You can use Data Store. Like you know all of these APIs already probably. You have life cycles. You have like all of these things. So you can like benefit from all of your existing knowledge by going to KMP. And if people are trying to build KMP projects and they're trying to hire for it, it's probably a good idea career-wise as well to like expand a bit, because again, like you probably are like 90% there just with Android skills already. And then you can pick up some iOS stuff.
Okay, thanks. So the audience questions. So you got another one. Okay.
It's a huge pain point. Lack of documentation and community. That's the worst. Who's going to go to the Kotlin Slack channel for answers? Okay, excluding some of us. All right, then.
I would say around 10%. from the audience?
Yeah, you shouldn't go there. There should be an official documentation, thorough documentation about how to set things up, and there's none. Or
Marty,
little.
I assume you would like to answer that. But
Yeah, I was. It's like it's moving too fast still. Like, how old is this technology? Like KMM? Like
KMP, come on.
sorry, but it used to be. It started out
yes.
as KMM in
Martin is heavy on
2018,
naming.
17. The first time Kotlin ran on a non-JVM target,
That's a quiz already?
like 2018, 17 maybe.
If JS counts, that's like 2012.
Okay, so it's been a long time already, but still it's moving too fast still to this day, and you have to decide on a lot of things, how you will build your multi-platform code. Will you use it directly, or you will just publish somewhere before you use it? So, and since it supports so many different kind of like architectures or team sizes, it's even harder to decide, because there won't be a one solution fits all solution. So it's really hard, and you have to think about it, and you have to experiment with it before you start using it. It's not like you just start.
Okay, I give you a minute to answer.
Okay, yeah. So there are a lot of
Let me
different.
take away the mic.
There are a lot of different onboarding scenarios. So there's people who only want to see mobile. There's always going to be people who are like, I want to use Compose, but only for desktop. So give me like a full onboarding path that only deals with desktop. So it's like only so much we can do for every single path. But of course, we're like picking priorities and things like that. Documentation is improving, I hope, a lot constantly, but there's always more to be done. If you or anyone in the audience has feedback on documentation, I would love to take notes. I did bring a notebook. I just don't want to fiddle with it on stage. I will absolutely take all of that like back inside JetBrains, and like we'll discuss it.
Okay,
very
thank you.
happily.
So we definitely need to answer some of the audience questions, and we have only time for a couple, but the first one. So from Tom, how challenging is to maintain a comprehensive safety net, including functional end-to-end unit tests in KMP, CMP, and CI setup in projects? Who would like to take that?
I don't test, so I can't answer.
I also haven't written tests for Kotlin Confab yet, because we had to
Unit
ship it.
tests, of course. You are not writing the code on the CI in a text editor? Am I the only one?
On production,
Sure, definitely.
real-man test on production, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we did tests. If memory serves, we targeted an 80% coverage rate, and it was real coverage, not the bullshit coverage that.
You know how you do that to write code actually on CI? There's an awesome library that turns all of the unit tests to green, but just on CI. I don't know. Have you heard about it? It's the Volkswagen test library. I let you think about why it's called Volkswagen test. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy if you pick the right framework. CodeTest, again, is just a great tool for it. You just pass a Gradle command then to the CI, and basically stellar.
Okay, one more. I like to pick this one. So it's specifically addressed to Marty, but so to Marty, do JetBrains plan on extending support for Swift? AppCode was a great IDE. Of course, if you don't know, JetBrains also doing IDEs like IntelliJ and Android Studio.
Also,
AppCode was
I love the also in there.
AppCode was a great IDE, and coming from Android Studio, Xcode is painful to use.
We're working on tooling. It will include Kotlin and Swift stuff, because we know that you need Swift support for KMP.
Okay, so
Soon.
So good. Soon. Okay, soon. No specific date to announce yet, right? Okay, maybe one quick one, because this is important. Is it possible to just partially use Compose Multiplatform for iOS UI and do the rest in Swift UI?
This is also for me, I guess. Yes, absolutely. You can, just like with anywhere else with KMP, also on the UI side, you can mix and match however you want. If you want one compose button in your Swift UI, you can do that. If you want your settings and about screens in shared compose and everything else with native Swift UI, you can do that. If you want to do every screen that like is only used by 20% of your users in compose, and you really want really fancy native stuff for the primary ones, you can do that. Like you can embed and match and mix and match these things arbitrarily. That's one of the huge points.
Okay, with that, I would like to thank you for the first section. We will have a next one, so save your questions, and also in the break, I think you can ask the nice folks. They won't bite, so thank you.
Okay, let's move on. So on the next session, kind of like as we ended at the end of the first session, the guy started to talk about the hurdles itself and the problems a little bit. So we're going to dive into that one. Tamás, Fábián, the co-organizer of the Budapest Kotlin team and the meetings, are going to be the moderator in this case. So Tamás, please applause for Tamás.
Thank you, guys. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. So thank you. I hope you all enjoyed the wonderful hot dogs, and I hope there is nothing left. So I hope you're open to hear the panel of experts insights about performance of the KMP, and I would like to ask them about the knowledge and comparison with other cross-platform solutions, and even what are their opinions about the future of even Kotlin Multiplatform, but of native and mobile development. So let's jump in to the performance part. And the first question would be that if you are considering KMP or CMP mobile app development, what are the key performance trade-offs compared to a fully native implementations? And maybe I would like to ask first, Marci, what's the official saying about the performance of the KMP?
Thank you. So on Android, it's a non-question, right? Like on Android, everything compiles the exact same way as you were writing just the Android app on its own. So it's going to be the exact same performance, same compose toolkit, same Google Jetpack dependencies under the hood. So on Android, it's the same. And then on other platforms, some of the reasons why some of them are not marked stable officially yet is because we are still working on performance. Not that we'll stop at stable, we'll always be working on performance in different areas, but that's one of the things that's keeping some of our platforms from stable. That being said, we think they're already really good across the board, including like iOS native performance and things like Compose across different platforms. We are going to publish some numbers and benchmarks around this soon-ish, but in our internal testing, they're pretty close, especially comparing with SwiftUI. Like it seems to be on par for the most part. Of course, there is some overhead. So like your app is going to be a bit larger because it has the Compose runtime in it on iOS. But I think compared to the average size of an iOS application, it's probably like a pretty okay thing.
And tell me more insights about how do you measure, how do you calculate these numbers?
We'll share it when we figured it out. So
okay, that's fully official.
No, like we have all kinds of benchmark suits. We have them for web, like on both for Compose and just synthetic benchmarks, running it on WASM, running it on JS, which was compiled from Kotlin. We can of course do synthetic benchmarks like this on iOS. We can do a bunch of testing for memory consumption, CPU use, and things like that through like Xcode debug tools. But we are working on like having a better benchmarking suite in general. this is something that, because we have to prioritize things, there's so many things that we need to work on in KMP. Like this is something that like isn't fully polished yet, for sure. But we'll have some initial things soon, because we do get that question a lot of like, how good is iOS performance?
Yeah, thank you. Suji, because you already have a bunch of experience with wide variety of projects, were there any specific performance bottlenecks? Can you tell me?
Yeah. So if you look at these apps, for sure you will see some kind of jank during navigation or something that's like, oh, it's usually when we do this kind of stuff natively, it doesn't happen. But on the other hand, you can also hear stories about Android folks not using Compose because they think that the view and the view animations are working better than Compose even today. But as Mirza said, with every new release, Compose is getting better. So I think what you see with Compose Multiplatform or on other platforms is just the regular Compose things that you should have to keep an eye on, like skipping stuff and stability and so on and so forth. But the other thing about these like janks and performance issues, I think we are only talking about UI performance, right? So did anyone hit performance issues with KMP itself? I think that's not really an issue. But for the UI, maybe Bence will have another opinion. But for the UI part, what I can tell that every cross-platform framework had this issue, like you shouldn't use React Native because if you have a large list, then it won't perform well. Or you shouldn't use Flutter on iOS because it's not ready because we have to rewrite the impeller and stuff like that. But the thing is, the NetBeans...
And don't mention Xamarin.
Yeah. But the thing is that not the current NetBeans era, but the previous one was created with React Native in 2018 by Supercharge. And none of the iOS users had this complaint that, oh, this is a huge list of restaurants, and when I scroll it, it lags somewhere. Because users don't care about that much as developers do. They will not scroll through all the restaurants. They will just scroll slowly and think about, oh, should I have sushi? Should I have a pizza? They will not see those janks between those really small scrolls. So I think this is not that much a user issue. This is much more like developers like measuring things.
It's our problem.
Just for a really quick comment. So two people have mentioned upgrading to new versions now. I really cannot recommend that enough, both with Compose and with Kotlin. Like there's going to be improvements in the compiler backend. There's going to be improvements in Compose. And of course, anything that improves in the core of Compose, so the compiler and runtime, that like whether that's Google or JetBrains contributions, all of that will move from Jetpack Compose into Compose Multiplatform itself. Like all of this is getting faster and faster and better and more stable all the time. So like make sure that you keep up to date with the versions.
We had huge performance issues on the web because the bundle size is just terrible. It's like 2 megabytes. So the first load is going to be pretty slow compared to native JavaScript libraries or frameworks. So that was the first reason we actually dropped Kotlin from the web.
Oh.
And the second was the dev experience and the build times. I mean, build times were just a minor issue that we encountered, but iOS and Android builds took like 15 minutes to clean build, but we introduced the JavaScript target. It grew to like 25, 28 minutes if memory serves.
I see. And what was the other option for the web for you?
We just replaced Kotlin Multiplatform with SWR.
Okay. And Mirza, do you had this kind of same things?
I had kind of same thing in iOS, usually like as Suji said, like with the list scrolling, but I also had like the experience with the web. It's like on the first load, you kind of had to wait, and like after like the 2 seconds, it appears, but then it's like the performance is good. But on the first reload, like it doesn't show anything. That was like the bad thing about the performance part.
And what about your notify library? Because
Yeah.
timing is really
Yeah, but it's just it doesn't use any UI part. Like the only UI part is showing the images on the notification. And usually I just load the image from the background, then I load it and destroy it. So it doesn't matter for the user, the notification shows 1 second or 2 seconds. So it's not an issue, I think.
do you any of you have a best practice or tips and tricks you could share? Even beside that, keep your CMP up to date.
For build times, make sure you don't disable all the different caching mechanisms. There's like 20 different kinds of enabling Gradle caching. Make sure that all of them are enabled. For native, for example, if you disable caching, you will have very slow builds. But there is caching support now, so you should use that. For web as well, we have incremental builds now. You should enable it. Of course, we're enabling more and more of these by default, but if you have like once disabled caching for like a bug fix a year ago, you should really revisit it because you're hurting performance and build times there. For iOS, we have a specific page for this now, which lists like all the different things that you should just sanity check because it might not be KMP or Compose's performance issue or like build time issue. Maybe you just have your build configured in a way where you're actively hurting things like build times.
Any of you?
Oh, and if you have like Compose performance issues, like you have a reproducible scrolling lag issue or something like that where you can share the code, or even if you can't share it publicly, but you can share it with JetBrains, opening a U-track issue in the Kotlin tracker is a great way to do that. Like we are actively looking for examples of this because again, for benchmarks,
kind of great tip.
for benchmarks, right? Like we need to find realistic examples and we can come up with all kinds of tests ourselves and we see that they are smooth, but if you're still telling us that it's laggy, at some point we need to see a reproducer so that we can figure out what's slow there.
As a great tip I can give is that make sure your Kotlin version, Android Gradle plugin version, and the Compose version like the same, like they're compatible with each other. Otherwise, you will have some errors that you will not understand. Yes.
Okay. Are there any other scenarios where native is preferred by you?
I kind of already had an example where you would end up with like not that much share code, but like a thin layer of shared code and then native implementation because you are using native SDKs. Maybe it's not the best part of your application to share. So yeah, if you have a huge layer like networking and database calls and stuff like that, or just like your regular business logic, then share that.
I will add one thing to that. For example, I had then applications that I had to use screen time, and the screen time in this it's only Swift UI, so I cannot use in the Compose Multiplatform. But there is obviously like the solutions that you write it on the Swift UI part, then you make some kind of factory. From the factory, you call that Swift UI, and in the Compose Multiplatform, you can call that native UI. Because when I started Compose Multiplatform, I thought, okay, I cannot write any Swift UI, I cannot write any native UI, but you can just mix. And if you need, for example, some solutions that it has to be Swift UI, then you can just mix it.
Yeah. And of course, ideally, someone has already done the hard work of bridging this. If there are like equivalents on multiple platforms, hopefully someone is already writing a library that will wrap them into a nice Kotlin common API. But if they haven't, you can always like drop down to the platform level. Like that's one of the beauties of it.
About that beauty, if you want to have big decimal support in your application, there are two libraries. One of them has 400 stars on GitHub. The other one has 40. Which one is buggy? What do you think? The one that has 400 stars. So be careful with those libraries. The ecosystem is still shaping, so maybe you need something really bad, but don't expect everything to be perfect just yet.
And follow Szugyiczki on GitHub too.
Follow me for more.
Okay, thank you. I hope all you got all the knowledge how we can supercharge or KMP supercharge or KMP application, and I'd like to ask you your opinion, and of course a Kotlin multi-platform and a multi-platform meetup wouldn't be great when we skip the comparison part with other multi-platform or cross-platform solutions. So the three we are to compare KMP with Flutter, React Native, and so on. Have you used, and I know several of you used any other cross-platform solutions. How was your experience compared to KMP?
We already had a small discussion about this, and I think my opinion is that your team will decide this question. If you have a bunch of like dedicated web developers, React Native will work really good for you. If you have native mobile developers and you want to convince them that you should start learning JavaScript to do the same job that you already do with your native toolkit, you will have a bad experience. And it's the same with Flutter. If you have a few guys who are already know how to create apps with Flutter, they will make it work. But if you want to convince someone that it will be the way to do cross-platform and they don't want to do it, they will find every way to break the system and tell you that it's not working and the performance is really bad, and they will just not try. But if you try, then all of these solutions can work really good for you. So it really doesn't have to be a question about the technology. If it's possible to do what you want to do with this, I'm pretty sure that you can do almost anything with all of these tools.
Bence, have you had any experience with Flutter, for example?
I do, but it was a long time ago. But dude,
it's a long story.
Yeah, I've been a native Android developer for like 10 years. I would roll with KMP and native even at a gunpoint. So.
I would also go with KMP, but I think, for example, in terms of, for example, Expo, I think the guys who work with the Expo, they are ahead of us in terms of the UI. They have a lot of, for example, UI frameworks. They can make, for example, beautiful UIs. But if, as a developer, you work without designers, then in this Kotlin or the Compose or the native, it's like we are kind of in the back of the list, I would say. But in the Expo is just UI framework, ready UI frameworks. They just use it right away, and it's really cool.
What's your opinion? Why KMP is better than other cross-platform solutions?
Well, because we work with the native and we can access anything. For example, I'm not sure, for example, when you work with the Expo, I didn't work, but I had a friend who worked with the Expo. I'm not sure if he can access, for example, that screen time API in the, for example, Swift side. For example, I know if I need to, in this Kotlin Multiplatform, I can access any platform-specific thing. It's just in terms of UI, I will lose more time for now. I wish there would be some frameworks as well in the Compose, some kind of UI components, ready components, but let's see in the future.
Yeah. On this topic, at the core of it, I would highlight just the flexibility again. So you don't have to go all in on KMP. Like you don't have to have 100% Kotlin code base for all platforms if you don't want to. You can start small. You can start with shared code and then later add native UI on one of your platforms if you figure out that that's what you need. But there's a lot of flexibility. Like it can fit into just about any project that has some base need of code sharing, because there are projects that might not have that. And it's ultimately very low risk, right? Because what you write with KMP is fully native for at least Android. So worst case scenario, you're never throwing that code out because that's your Android implementation. And again, that's the worst case scenario. Like obviously, ideally, you don't have to think about this, but with other frameworks, if you need to bail, you are throwing out all of your code and then starting from scratch on every single platform. So kind of the low risk part of it is, I think, also quite nice.
Suji, because you have experience with Flutter, React Native, and even KMP?
I just made the face because the worst case is that your team lead or someone above you will decide that we will go Flutter or React Native, and you will end up throwing all your code.
Can you compare with KMP with Flutter?
Of course. For me, it's, but I don't know. And maybe, usually the question is, should we do two separate native apps or should we go cross-platform? Because in the end of the day, these are competing not with native, but with each other. If you have all the resources, all the money, all the time, you would be crazy not to go native for both platforms, because that's where you don't have any compromise. You have the best user experience, you have the best tooling. So that's why I think it's always about money and time and resources, and you want to save something. And when you think about it, you will think about, okay, should we go with this tool or this tool or that tool? And when it comes to that question, I think the most important part will, one of the most important factors will be your own team and not how these tools compete with each other.
Okay, but with your experience, will you start a feature-rich banking application, for example, in Flutter?
I wouldn't, because my team prefers KMP, because we are native developers. But I know about companies that do mobile banking apps with Flutter. It's doable, and the Flutter tooling is getting better and better. We also did multi-module development with Flutter. It wasn't that great as it is with Gradle builds, but it's getting better and better. It just got multi-package support recently.
Okay, and have you heard about Swift multi-platform? Anyone? There is a motivation. Okay, there is a motivation from the Swift guys to dominate the world like Kotlin does with Kotlin Multiplatform. So there is a motivation to create Swift Multiplatform. How do you see the future of Kotlin Multiplatform beside of this news?
I'm really happy for that, because competition is always
As a
good.
competitor, yeah?
Yeah. What I have seen of, we are talking about Skip?
No, Swift.
Swift, but the Skip.
Yeah, that's another tool. But we can mention that as well. It's
that's also a Swift-based multi-platform tool?
Yes, it transpiled your code.
It used to be transpiling.
Yeah.
Just that they started to do real compiling to other targets stuff. And I think that's really good, and I hope there will be competition, and we will see cool stuff made with that also. And maybe we can steal ideas from each other.
How JetBrains?
So on the general Swift multi-platform stuff, I don't know what the state of it is. I've seen the Java interop thing they had going for, I think, server side for their own use. I don't know what's happening elsewhere. Is the thing.
Okay.
I've heard about Skip. We did a Talking Kotlin episode with them. We're on good terms.
What about you, Mirza?
Just heard. But I think we will learn from each other. At some point, it will just cross on the some point. It will be it will make the both platforms or both tools great, I think. But we will see. We don't know.
Yeah. To add something meaningful to this question as well from my side. So I do often say that the only thing that could compete with Kotlin on the part that it's fully native on Android is if you could write Swift and you could target both platforms and then be on mobile as well. So if that happens, that might be a competitor in a way, but we also run completely natively in both parts, right? So Swift would have to really run on the JVM to be as native on Android as we are on iOS. And so they have the same memory space and access to APIs. And I can it's not easy building a multi-platform framework. Good luck to anyone.
You know that. Is multi-platform development the solution for everything?
Wait a sec. There's an out-of-box approach to sharing code, and
Tell me.
it's Apple's Pickle.
Apple what?
Pickle.
Pickle.
Yeah, it's basically JSON on steroids. It's
Oh my
executable and configurable, so you can actually share code and share like view model logics or formatting with it. So it's not an actual cross-platform or multi-platform framework, but you can achieve the same exact thing with it.
Nice. I hope you jotted down. And finally, very last question on the last page. What's your prediction about mobile development? Because I don't know what your experience with the candidates, for example, maybe there are less or more, or I think less, and mobile projects maybe. I don't think it's the end of mobile era, but what's your opinion about that?
I'll take this. I think everyone is going to lose their job to AI. Then, given that we are starting to build more cross-platform and multi-platform solutions, there's less need for resources for engineers. So eventually, the market is going to shrink, and it's actually been like that for a year or a year and a half, maybe. There are less projects to take. I was about to say
You can say that the AI assistant will dominate the world.
well, and we'll just see
You
what
don't have the AI assistant, AI companion.
No, not yet.
What was the name of it? No, not friend. There was a that's it.
It's been shut down.
Yeah, I know.
So I think eventually we are going to be full stack mobile developers, doing both iOS and Android. That's my take.
Yeah, I'm living in the agency bubble, but we definitely see that the demand for cross-platform is growing, like year by year. But on the other hand, maybe we are on a turning point where not everyone thinks that I need a mobile app, because that used to be the case that everyone wanted a mobile app, even though a website for mobiles with mobile support suited them better. So that's also a factor that we are seeing. And nowadays everyone wants to make an AI agent.
AI.
I think it will shape, but definitely we can answer that there's not that high demand at the moment.
I don't have a comment on the like mobile industry trends necessarily, but on like AI taking our jobs. I think that the way we see it from the JetBrains side is that AI doesn't have to take our jobs, but we can like balance our own development and AI assistance during that. So like what our offerings aim to do is meet you like at any point of the scale, depending on how much you like interacting with AI and using it to help you. So whether you just want like some basic completion or you want like the full agentic mode. And of course, we'll also like looking at products that would target people who don't want to write code at all, just interact with the AI and create things dynamically like that. So we're trying to cover this whole scale, and we are really trying to meet you where you want to be with AI tooling. Like I think it's really okay if like whichever level you enjoy using, that's fine, that's good. Just build cool things.
And does JetBrains train their AI assistant about Kotlin Multiplatform?
Sure. So
Sure.
we have. It's a complex question, but yes, AI Assistant and Junie can do Kotlin Multiplatform. They do quite well with both KMP in general and Compose code. Like some people were worried that because Compose is so new compared to like other things like maybe Flutter, like there might be more Flutter sample code to train things on. But we found that Compose is like very well supported by various LLMs. So we really didn't have any trouble with that. Like they can definitely help you with KMP Compose and all of this. Not like a library that's from a month ago. Like that depends on like more complex integrations, but in general, they're quite good.
And they are quite good with translating Compose code to Swift UI code. If we are talking about code sharing, that's another way to share code. If you want to keep your Swift
Share
UI.
with AI.
Sorry?
Share with AI.
Share with AI, yeah.
I will approach this question more optimistically. And I would say from the solo developer perspective, with AI, you can have like the thousands, millions, like the app ideas. You can build like the each, even so from the developer perspective, it can be seen like the AI wrapper app. The usual, like the user doesn't see that. So you can build it like the one app and monetize it. So you can create your own project. So that's my more like the optimistical perspective.
Thank you. Let's turn to the QA session. Sorry. And let's check the first one. Are there any plans to bring hot reload butter to Kotlin multi-platform development in the near future?
Yes.
And yes.
So we have something called Compose Hot Reload, which has been around publicly since November or so a couple months. You can already use it. You can add it to your project. You can try it. I encourage you to do it. I can give you a demo after this if you want to have a look because you haven't seen it yet. It is a hot reload solution. It's doing magic. It's a wonderful like technical solution. It combines very cool like runtime class redefinition technologies with the Compose runtimes capabilities. Like it's actually surprising how well all of these things come together to give you a cool hot reloading solution. And of course, there's a lot of engineering effort into it as well. Sebastian Selmayr, who works on this, is an absolutely brilliant engineer, and he's doing great stuff there. It's in like an alpha state, but it's dev tooling, so like you can't break your project by adding hot reload to it.
You have had some live streams about hot reload as well.
Yes, we
okay.
also had those.
It's worth to check. The next one, what approach would you suggest for a migration of a live app to Kotlin Multiplatform? What works and what doesn't? Do you have any experience with a big migration?
I'd say just go module by module, keep it small, and then scale it up.
Which module would you start with? Which part and module? But
Probably the most important module or feature of your entire app to break things.
break things, okay.
No. Jokes aside, something small, something minor that's going to pass through QA.
What QA?
What good? So what we've seen from a lot of companies is that they tend to start with things like analytics. Like we've heard that 1,000 times.
It's a good one.
So just making sure you're hitting the same endpoints with the same data in the same format with the same keys, because these are things that are really easily misaligned across platforms if you're not syncing it somehow programmatically. And of course, like you basically just need a multi-platform networking library, so you can just grab Ktor and just throw analytics at the server from both platforms. As for starting with the hardest part, that's kind of what Google has done for Workspace. So they're doing KMP adoption in Google Workspace, and they started with Google Docs because they were sure that they were gonna hit all of the possible issues with KMP there. And it's live on iOS, so they're probably gonna keep expanding from there. Nice. And they replaced their crazy in-house solutions with this, which used to, I don't even know which way the language is transpiled, but they had a lot of custom cross-platform magic.
We have time for one more. It's from Tom. Would you agree that introducing KMP significantly increases both clean and incremental build times?
I think previously, like for example, 1 year ago, yes, it used to be. But right now, for example, when I do that, usually I don't see any like the build time difference in terms of the, for example, Android. In iOS, I'm not sure if it comes from the Gradle sync or it comes from the iOS sync, but I think it comes from the Gradle sync. But with Android, it's just the fast as the normal Android build.
But I think you will still have the problem that you are only fixing like an Android misalignment of a text, and still you will build the iOS and the Android app because you will not optimize the build that okay, I will first analyze the code, and if it doesn't hit any iOS related part, then I will just skip the iOS building part. So definitely you will have more time spent on CI.